Hello students, I hope you all are good there. Welcome to your channel Zebish English Classes. Today again I have taken up the same book, that is Reverie, which is from ISC board for the students of 11th as well as 12th standard. And the poem that I have taken up today is the very first poem from this book, that is The Darkling Thrush. The Darkling Thrush has been written by Thomas Hardy. Thomas Hardy was a great novelist as well as a great poet of the late 19th century. Now let us understand something about 19th century. 19th century shows the features of modern era. What are the features of modern era? Actually, in the 19th century, modern era had already started, and that's why it was showing the features of modern era. Now, what are the characteristics of modern era? The very first thing, that industrial revolution had taken place, and as a result of industrial revolution, small firms and small business had completely been disrupted, and they were all replaced by big industries and big firms, and it was all depending on high advertisements because it was a time that believed the more presentable the more marketable, so things were depending on advertisements at that point of time, and quality had been continuously degrading. And also there was a very noticeable change in the society at that point of time, that people were getting diverted towards advancement of technology. That means their attention was no more towards God. They had started thinking scientifically, and their faith in God had been continuously declining, and their belief in technology, in science, had been continuously rising. So, the advancement of technology and the decline in faith of God are also the prominent features of the modern era. And all these things had been witnessed by the poet, due to which the poet Thomas Hardy was very, very sad. And at this point of time, when he wrote this poem, actually 19th century was coming to an end, and that's why the poet was very, very sad. He was so sad that he started imagining the end of the 19th century as the death of the 19th century. Why? Why was he sad about the end of the 19th century? He was sad about the end of the 19th century because he was thinking in this way, that if 19th century had turned out to be so catastrophic and so destructive that it showed a complete destruction of the society in terms of faith and happiness and quality and honesty, probity, then what would follow next in the 20th century? That's why he was upset to think that the 20th century would bring something more catastrophic, more destructive, and he was not able to welcome 20th century with a happy heart. That's why he wrote this poem, The Darkling Thrush. So we can understand that at the point of time the poet wrote this poem, he was very sad and completely negative in his mood. He was very pessimistic. So the poet began to write this poem in a very pessimistic or negative mood. But all of a sudden, the mood of the poet changes, and he turns into positive. He turns into positivity. His mood changes into positive. And how does it happen? It happens due to the thrush. And that's why the title of the poem says The Darkling Thrush. Actually, let us understand the title of this poem first of all, The Darkling Thrush. The darkling means in the darkness, and thrush refers to a bird. Thrush is a bird. That means a bird in the darkness. That means this bird enters into a darkness, into that phase of society when there's a lot of darkness, ignorance, and then that bird that although enters into a darkness, yet it brings a lot of hope, happiness, positivity, optimism with itself. And as soon as it enters, it changes the entire mood of the poet, entire tone of the poem, and the poem that begins on a very pessimistic note, it ends on a very optimistic note. Okay, so let me also tell you that this poem is an elegy. Now, what is an elegy? Elegy is that poem that expresses sadness, especially about the death of somebody. And since here the poet has considered 19th century as die as a person, there's a figure of a speech personification. And poet is so upset about the end of the 19th century that he regards its end as its death. He thinks as if the 19th century is dying. And since the 19th century has been considered as a person, the figure of his speech is personification. 19th century has been personified, and the poet thinks that 19th century is dying. And the poet is upset and sad on the death of the 19th century. And that's why on that ground the poem can be said that it is an elegy. So this poem has been written in four stanzas. The first two stanzas are completely negative in tone, and the last two stanzas are completely positive in tone. That means the poem that begins on a very negative note will end on a very positive note. And that you have already understood how and why. It is only because of the entry of the bird thrush that brings positivity with itself and changes the entire mood of the poet, who was very sad and negative in the beginning. So the I'm giving you the summary of this poem. That's why I'll tell you in a summarized way. In the very first stanza of this poem, the poet has simply described the setting of the poem, you can say, or the scene, right, where he is standing. He's simply standing in a pastoral area where there's a lot of nature around him, and he is standing at the fencing of that forest area, and he is very sad, he is very upset, and so as to accentuate that sadness, he has also given you the description of that external scene, that is, snowfall is taking place, winter season is there, and we know that in literature winter season is a symbol of depression, sadness, and death. So, winter season is there, the poet is also sad from inside. The external atmosphere is also very harmonious with the mood of the poet. So, we can see that outside there seems to be a lot of depression due to snowfall, and then inside also the poet is very sad because of the death of the 19th century. In the second stanza, the poet will simply describe 19th century as a dead body. And there's a figure of speech called personification. 19th century has been personified, and personified means that it has been treated as a person. You can understand, डेथ वर्ड हम इंसान के लिए यूज़ करते हैं. हम ये नहीं कहते 19th सेंचुरी की मौत हो गई है, या फिर 19th सेंचुरी मर गया, या फिर 2020 मर जाएगा, 2019 मर गया. We say that 2019 came to an end. 2020 will come to an end. We don't say that they died. Why? Because they are not persons. लेकिन अगर हम ऐसे कहेंगे that 2019 died, that means I have personified, I have treated it as a person. So here the poet has treated 19th century as a person. That means he has used a figure of speech called personification. So here in the second stanza you will see that the poet has personified 19th century, and he has described it lying as a dead body, and the poet is lamenting over that dead body because he was very upset to think that 19th century has died, and he was upset to think that just because he was not able to welcome 20th century, because he had already witnessed a lot of destruction in 19th century itself, and he was not at all happy to think about 20th century, since he was not at all positive and was expecting something really worse in 20th century that would come. So then comes the third stanza. In the third stanza, you will see that the bird thrush enters, and as soon as it enters, the entire atmosphere in the poem changes and it completely becomes positive in tone. You will see how that bird has been described in the third stanza, and the description of the bird is so pathetic. You will get to see that it is old, it is thin, it is frail, weak, and in spite of being so pathetic in its appearance, it is full of positivity, hope, and love, optimism, and happiness. So we see that in the fourth stanza, that bird that has been described as a pathetic figure in its physical appearance will rather sing songs full of optimism, positivity, happiness, and love and hope. And that thing actually changes the mood of the poet. And the poet realizes that if such a pathetic figure, although entered into a darkness, although entered into the phase when there was so much of darkness, so much of murk, and so much of negativity in the entire atmosphere, Still, this bird chose to sing the songs of happiness, hope, love, positivity. And that's how the poet learnt the message of positivity and decided not to remain sad anymore but become happy to think that there might be something better. That means one should always remain hopeful instead of being negative about any change because change can be better as well. It's all about the way we think. So we need to change our perspectives. I hope you have understood the summary of this poem. Please subscribe to this channel and also like if you have actually liked. Thank you.